My name is Dr. Liz Selinger, and I am the Director of Education and ABA Services at the Institute of Professional Practice. And I am with a group of amazing women experts who are going to introduce you introduce themselves to you. Chrissy, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Chrissy Martinez. I am the Director of School Partnerships with IPPI. I have a special education certification as a special education teacher in my career, as well as a certified school administrator in the state of Connecticut. Katie?
Hi, I'm Katie Sear. I am the Project Director of Private Schools here at IPPI Learning Academy, and I'm a board certified behavior analyst. And this is also relevant to me because I have 2 young children at home.
Lisa?
I am Dr. Lisa Dobey. I am the school psychologist at the IPPI Learning Academy. And prior to working at IPPI, I worked in public school for a long time. So I have a lot of experience just kind of with working with parents and school teams.
And Michelle?
Hi, I'm Michelle Levine. I am a pre-doctoral intern at IPPI Learning Academy, and prior to getting my doctorate, I am a certified school psychologist in the state of Connecticut.
Great, thanks guys. So last week we all got together and we recorded our introductory session, and we kind of talked about why we're doing this. And the reason why we decided to kind of come together and have this little weekly chat is because we recognize how different all of our lives are for so many different reasons related to COVID-19 and the being kind of quarantined to our homes and working from home and distance learning for our children and all of these different things. So we thought it would be a great idea for us to kind of come together and use our areas of expertise to kind of talk to each other about kind of the things that we're going through and kind of offer some support and suggestions to all of you out there who may be, having some difficulties with a variety of things, just with dealing with life at home, having children and providing distance learning, having children with varying needs who have, who are receiving all different types of services through virtual learning. So we just thought it would be a really nice way to kind of support each other and support all of you. And what we started with last week was we were talking about self-care and how important it is for us to really take care of ourselves during this time. And that seems, and it sounds so indulgent, right? That we have to take care of ourselves first or else we're not going to be able to take care of others, but that's truly very important. And so we talked a little bit about self-care, and what we led to was we said, okay, so for this first live session, we were going to introduce some different areas of self-care. And the first one we just kind of mentioned was this idea of mindfulness. And so the very first question that came up when we mentioned that it was, all right, behavior analysts, you're telling me to think about mindfulness. What is mindfulness? What does that really mean? And, so over the course of the week, we've all been chatting with each other, trying to talk about how we were going to bring this up in this session today. And we came to this conclusion of the best definition of what is mindfulness. And I'm pulling from John Kabat-Zinn, who, if you ever want to read anything about mindfulness, he's your guy. And his definition of mindfulness is simply the awareness that arises from paying attention on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. And I think the idea about mindfulness is you don't need a yoga mat, you don't need any special equipment, you don't need an hour or even 10 minutes. It's just a simple awareness through paying attention in an effort to kind of understand ourselves better. And, let's face it, we are all always in this selfing mode, right? Trying to figure things out. We're constantly stuck in the past in regret mode. Oh, I should have done this. And right now, right, this is kind of where a lot of us are living with COVID-19 is this future, is this worry mode. It's this, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? What's life going to look like? And, there was a study done some years ago in Harvard where it said that 47% of the time we are thinking about something other than what it is that we're doing. So we're not focusing on our task at hand 47% of the time. And now think about with COVID-19 and everything that's going on in your homes, with your kids, with your families, with your dog, with everything. And I'm guessing that that's probably an underestimate, right? And so why we're doing this is, research shows that mindfulness can reduce stress, can reduce anxiety, can help with working memory. So there's reasons why mindfulness is a thing. And there's a lot of research to support it. So I'm going to stop talking because I want us to start this conversation about, mindfulness and how it can kind of work. So Michelle, I kind of want to start with you because the other day we were having this conversation and you really focused in on the part of the definition of being non-judgmental. Can you just talk to us a little bit about that, what that means maybe to you and why it's important?
Absolutely. So going back to the definition that you just read, the non-judgmental part is the real challenge. When we start to pay attention to what's on our minds and mindfulness, we notice that we might have ideas and opinions on everything. So this is good, this is bad, I don't like that, I like that. So when we are paying attention in the moment, we will have kind of these opinions that arise and these judgments. So non-judgmentally doesn't mean that there won't be judgments in our mind, but we'll be more aware of our judgments. We can kind of see what's unfolding and not judge our judgments, but recognize it and say, okay, I might not like that and move on. Maybe be more aware of what's happening in our bodies rather than judging our judgments about it. So if we are experiencing some sort of negative feeling, we may have an increase in our pulse and say, okay, my pulse is raised right now, and experience the moment and move on and kind of think about that as it's happening. So we can kind of see what's unfolding in our lives and not judge it, but recognize and understand it and our relationship to that experience. We can kind of see that they're temporary thoughts or ideas, and we don't need to be swept away by them. So like I said, if our pulse is rising, we don't need to focus on or judge that our pulse is increasing, but just be aware of it and move back to the experience that you're having. So we just are witnessing whatever comes up in our bodies and our minds and recognizing those things.
It doesn't sound easy. I mean, it sounds, right. I feel like it sounds easy, but then when you start doing it or you try it, you immediately start to judge yourself, right? I don't know about you guys, but that's my whole thing. When I first started reading about mindfulness and understanding, like, that's not for me because I am just too busy for all of that. I can't. So it's hard, right? It's not something that's easy to do.
Right. And I think some of the things that you do for mindfulness, like focus on your breathing, the minute that you might start that, you might have a thought and say, well, I can't do this. I just had a negative thought, or I just had a thought about what I'm going to do later. That's okay. You recognize the thought. And, it's something that can take days or weeks or months or years to kind of refine your practice. But once you start, you can kind of notice a little bit of a change in your thinking.
So that's interesting. So you mentioned something that's really interesting in terms of it being this practice, right? So we are saying, well, it really is just this awareness, but it is also something to practice mindfulness. But I want to go over to Lisa because we were talking the other day too about things, and Katie, you were talking about this too, about all of these things that you kind of do that are mindful, that you're present and but you're not, you don't even know you're practicing mindfulness when you're doing it, right? But so there are some things that you, like, what kinds of things can we do that are considered mindfulness, or that could be made part of our practice without us even knowing it's a practice?
Yeah, and I think part of, for me, so Katie had sent out that list of like different things that you can do to practice mindfulness. And one of the things on the list was mindful coffee. But that really like resonated with me because that's part of my morning routine and has been for a very long time, is to just literally take a minute. Usually I've just gotten out of the shower and I'm just sitting down and I'm sitting with my coffee, and all I'm thinking about and all I'm experiencing in this like 5-minute period during the day is my coffee. Like I'm tasting it, I'm smelling it, and I'm just sort of like sitting within myself. And I had never really thought of it as mindfulness, but that's exactly what it is. And it's sort of just like my time to like reset my brain and get ready for the day. And I've found that I'm really lost without it. But again, I never really thought of it as a practice. It's just something that I do. And I think that there are a lot of us who have things in our lives that we're probably already doing, that kind of give us that kind of present moment awareness, but we might not even be realizing it. So we've been talking earlier about how like cooking and baking have become really popular activities during COVID-19. I think one, because we're looking for things to do. But two, I think, you know, Katie, to your point earlier, there's something about like following a recipe and just focusing on that and having it be the only thing that you're focused on. And you can sort of push all the other stuff out and just sort of be in the moment and, you know, kind of doing that thing that you're doing. And I think cooking provides that for a lot of people. I think baking definitely provides that for me. And I think there are lots of things in our lives that we do in a mindful way that we don't necessarily think of. So something else that I know other people like to do is gardening, right? So just being out in kind of your yard and just focusing on whatever it is you're doing, weeding, which is very repetitive and you're not really, you know, it's something that requires a ton of conscious thought, but you're very like in the present moment and focused on exactly what you're doing. So I think a lot of us, if we think about it, can probably identify a few areas where we're already kind of practicing mindfulness, but maybe haven't thought of it that way yet.
Yeah, and I think the biggest point is I used to be in the camp, like Liz mentioned at the beginning, that mindfulness means that you're sitting on a yoga mat, you're all alone, it's completely silent, nobody's bothering you. So at the time when I started thinking about this, I had like a 2 and a 4-year-old, and I'm like, well, I have no time in my life for mindfulness. But now I realize that you could do it anywhere with anything. So I'm one of the ones who cooking for me is my mindful time, and it's not quiet. My kids are in the living room doing whatever they're doing. My husband is around, my dog might be barking, but I'm just not paying attention to all of that. What I'm paying attention to is following the recipe, and that's my mindful time, even though it's not quiet and perfect.
So what about when your dog is at your feet and your kids are fighting? Now they're at your feet. How can you stay mindful with your recipe when all of that, like you said, you can ignore them when they're kind of doing their own thing. Yeah. But what about, because I'm like, cooking is not a time for me to be able to do that because everybody is there, like, and they're in my face, and they're mommy, and the dog is barking. And so how can you, or what are some other things that take maybe 10 seconds, or are there things that are that quick that can really have some impact? Because, you know, when we're talking about this practice, there is research to support that you can actually like change your brain to be more present and to be more aware. And that's how you're going to reduce the anxiety and all those things. So every little bit helps. So what are some of these little things, you know, that, you know, we talked about the coffee, holding your coffee, and then doing a recipe. So what are some other things that people might be able to do? That's kind of the first question. And then the second thing, and I don't know, maybe for families, when we're talking about your own kind of sanity, but we've got kids too, right? Who are going through this as well. And I think that that's something that as parents, we don't always know how to support them. And mindfulness can have an impact on them too. And are there things that they could do, or that we could support with them, or that we could do as a family?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing, my biggest aha moment. So when like kids are upset or anybody's upset or crying, your go-to is to find a way to get them to stop, because it's uncomfortable. So you're going to say, oh, stop crying. This is why everything is going to be okay. And it never works. It just makes them kind of unravel even more. So my biggest kind of success I have an 8-year-old who's really having a hard time with disclosure. And sometimes I'll just find her in a room and she's crying, she's sad. And my gut reaction is to try to make her feel better and to try to fix it. But instead, what I've started saying is, yeah, this is really sad, and it's okay to be sad. And you know what? I could just sit here and be sad with you until you're done. And then she just kind of sits in it, and that usually helps her move on a little bit quicker. She lets herself be sad, and then the emotion passes and she can move on. So that's kind of in the moment. Some of the things that we do just for kind of fun activities that are like the simple day-to-day is something as simple as coloring. So like on a lazy morning, we might just print out some coloring pages and we just sit and color together. We don't even talk. And then when we're done, we share. Other things, we like to go for walks. So when we're walking, I might just kind of make a game of it and say, what are the 5 things that you hear when we're walking? And they could kind of just pick up on that. There are a couple apps that I like with my kids. One is Smiling Minds. They have a lot of guided meditations on that app. And then my favorite YouTube channel is Mind Yeti. And
Mind Yeti?
Mind Yeti, like the Abominable Snowman. And it's videos. They're all about 3 minutes. The kids like them. They're short. That kind of helps just getting the kids into the moment. Once in a while, I like to challenge them with a silent meditation, but it's usually only for about 30 seconds to a minute. And we're proud of them for that.
Before we go farther, I do want to say, I noticed that we do have a couple of attendees in Zoom. And for those of you guys participating via live on Zoom, you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen if you have any questions for us related to this. And for those on Facebook Live, you can just type your questions into the comments and we'll try to answer them as we're, as we're going along here. Chrissy.
I just wanted to pop in and go back to something too. Oh, sorry, I cut you off.
Well, we talked at the same time. I said, Chrissy.
I want to go back to the beginning of what Michelle was saying, because I think it's so important. I think I fell into the same trap. I remember doing my first mindfulness activity in a workshop several years ago, maybe 5 years ago, and thinking so critically of myself in that moment as the person was walking us through this activity, and my thoughts were everywhere and it was very difficult. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is the longest 2 minutes of my life. And why is this man torturing me? I cannot focus on this. And when we were talking the other day, Michelle, and you brought up this non-judgmental piece, it's so important for us, especially right now, to not be judgmental of ourselves, because this is really hard. It's hard as a parent. Many of us are working. We're watching our children, maybe going through, Liz, you had mentioned earlier today, outside of this webinar, that our kids are grieving. They're grieving the loss of seeing their friends, of maybe big events that they were supposed to have in school, whether it's a graduation or an end of the year assembly, or these traditions that they might have in each of their schools that they're just missing. So it's hard. I know my daughter the other day, we have quite a span in our home. I have a high school student, a middle school student, and an elementary school student. So we're kind of all over the map, and I see them each in their own struggles through this. And some days one handles it better than the other, but going back to what Katie said, like allowing them to feel their feelings. My daughter said, I'm not going to have an 8th grade graduation, Mom. And I was like, oh my God, why was I not even thinking about that? And just taking the time in that moment to talk through the feelings and feel the feelings, I think. Yeah. And again, like you were saying, not be judgmental. It's okay to feel our feelings. My 17-year-old missed his junior prom. He doesn't care. I was more upset. But it's definitely this grieving process. And I think we have to do our best. Liz, I love what you said in the beginning. If we're living in the past, we're living in regret. And if we're living in the future, we're living in worry, and just trying to be present in the moment. And it's hard. It's really hard.
It's hard. I've noticed how hard it is to be non-judgmental at the things that I get very quick to get angry about.
Yes.
In fact, if I snap at my kids or my dog, I'm like, did I really just get mad at that? That was such a
right.
Yeah. And I do, you want to beat yourself up for it, but I think that's part of the process is yes, I got angry because it makes me angry when, they interrupt me when I'm cooking dinner mindfully, but
yeah. And I think
that's okay.
If we're in that moment, that only gives us more information for next time. So to say, okay, right now I was coloring with my child. And, oh, well, I had a thought about, well, what am I going to do when this is all over? Or how am I going to get through this? Okay, so you had that thought. And then maybe next time or tomorrow or later on today, you can try and concentrate for 30 more seconds on just coloring. But accepting that you have those thoughts, because we all have those thoughts, and not being judgmental of ourselves for having those thoughts. And that's the whole thing about it, is trying to focus as much as we can on the activity, but also saying, all right, a thought just came up and that's okay. And, you know, next time maybe I'll try and focus a little bit longer on just coloring and coloring inside the lines, or whatever it takes.
So we don't have a ton of time left, but there's two things that, well, there's one thing, more topic I kind of want to talk a little bit about before we get to kind of a fun activity in the end. But so I know at the IPPI Learning Academy, we're doing distance learning. You know, we're having these groups, we're doing some, you know, mindfulness activities with the kids and with the staff. And I want to focus on the kids a little bit. Can we talk just a little bit about what we're doing with kids and how, you know, and how we're building it into the distance learning? I think this is kind of a bigger topic, and one maybe we can continue if we get some questions about it for next week. But I just kind of want to introduce that topic of what are some of these things that we can do with kids during distance learning to help them cope in a mindful way. And this really goes to anyone in the group. But for those of you who I know are doing some of this, Michelle and Lisa.
Well, I think part of this kind of goes back to, I think what Katie and Chrissy were talking about in terms of just sitting with your feelings. I think part of our work is always kind of helping kids recognize what they're feeling and just kind of understanding that feelings are okay. And I think that's great for kids. I also think it's great for us. Just
it's so hard.
That, like, it's okay. Like, this is such an anxiety-provoking, confusing time. Like, it's okay to feel really sad. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel confused. It's okay to feel worried. Because I think, you know, kind of just sitting with that and feeling it is part of mindfulness, part of, you know, just being in the moment. And then there are a lot of activities that I've done with kids. I might be doing one with you guys in a few minutes, but you can do them with adults and with kids. There are lots of great ways to just kind of get kids engaged in kind of quick little snippets of activity. So there are things you can do with kids on breathing. I do a lot of breathing activities with kids. There are kind of more thought activities where you can kind of think about your thoughts and kind of different ways that you can practice just your thoughts moving through your mind. Those work with kids. And I think, to Katie's point earlier, not something that we necessarily do in the schools, but definitely something that you can do at home are activities like coloring. I used to have kids, they're called mandalas, they're like really complicated coloring patterns that take a long time to fill in, that you can concentrate on in color. I think puzzles are also something that I know people are doing with their kids at home. So there are lots of different things that we are doing and can be doing with kids to kind of help them with mindfulness.
Anybody else? Yeah, I was thinking too about, I've observed, you know, some of the breathing exercises where we're using a lot of visuals to support those breathing exercises. And I think those are some really great resources to make it more visual, so that, and not just for the kids, but for the adults too, so that we learn how to breathe and how breathing, you know, helps us be in the moment. And we have a way, you know, we have a way to do it. So we understand what it is that we're doing.
That's a really good point. And I think, so I use the Zones of Regulation curriculum, and they have put some of their materials online. I don't know if they've put any visuals for breathing, but we could check that out to see if that's a resource we could point people to. Yeah.
That's great. So for next week, I'd love to see what questions we get from some of the attendees and about mindfulness and specifically related to education for distance learning and how we might be able to incorporate some of those pieces into our day or into some of our lessons even. And so unfortunately, we're going to have to close. But before we do, Dr. Dobey is going to lead us through a pretty quick and easy to kind of repeat mindfulness activity if you're interested in joining us. And we will close at the end of that. So hopefully you will have some questions for us that we'd be happy to answer next week. And we look forward to seeing you all next week on the next Coffee Talk. Lisa.
Yeah, so I'm going to lead you through, it is one of my kind of favorite mindfulness activities. It's pretty accessible, tangible, and there are about a zillion ways that you can do it, but it's called the 5 senses activity. And so kind of the first thing that you can do is just find a comfortable seated position. So I like to think of having both feet on the ground. You can kind of sit up just in a way that's comfortable for you. And then focus, you don't have to focus too much on it, but focus on your breathing in a way that's comfortable for you. So, you know, just kind of calm, soothing breaths in and calm breaths out. I also like to think more about my exhaling than my inhaling, because when you're exhaling, that's actually what is signaling to your nervous system to kind of slow down. But really just focus on kind of comfortable breathing. And as you're doing that, the first thing that I want you to kind of focus on is just 5 things that you can see. And they can be any 5 things. So like if I'm looking around my house, I can see there's a chair in front of me. I can see out the window. And if you're seeing things, I can also see like dishes in my sink. So that's an example of something that you might be seeing and having some judgments about. And that's okay. So just focus on kind of 5 things in your kind of immediate vicinity that you can see. And I'll give you just a couple seconds to kind of do that. And as you're looking around, just remember to keep breathing. So the next sense that we're going to focus on is hearing. And hearing for me is an interesting one because you can't really focus on what you are hearing until you kind of quiet yourself. So until you kind of turn your voice off and really kind of focus on listening. So I want you to focus on 4 things that you can hear. And again, it can be anything. And I think sometimes when we're focusing on what we're hearing, we actually notice things that we haven't noticed before. So you might notice something obvious. Maybe your next door neighbor is mowing their lawn. For me, it's the hum of my refrigerator that I can hear, but I can only really hear it when I've kind of quieted myself. Maybe it's the sound of my voice. Anything that you can kind of focus on. So I like to focus on just 4 things that you can hear. I'll give you a couple seconds to just kind of focus in on that. And remember, you're just continuing to practice your kind of comfortable breathing, whatever is comfortable for you. And so the next sense is touch. So I like to think about just 3 things that you can touch. Again, it's just whatever is in front of you. So it could be the table, it could be a pen, it could be your coffee mug, just 3 things that you can touch. And then the next sense is smell. And kind of like with hearing, I feel like smell is one of those things that you kind of have to focus in on to really be able to experience it. So unless there's something really obvious that you can smell. So I like to think about 2 things that you can smell. It can be, maybe it's your lotion. Maybe it is if there's fabric softener that you use to wash your clothes. Maybe it's your shampoo. Could be anything, just 2 things that you can smell. And remember, we're just going to continue with our comfortable, kind of calm, quiet breaths. And then our last sense is taste. And this one is a little bit trickier because you're not always eating or drinking something. But if you are, you can focus in on that. So if you're drinking your coffee, you could just focus on the taste of your coffee. If you don't have something that you can taste, you can just kind of imagine something that you might want to taste. Like maybe it's your favorite dessert. Maybe it is what you're gonna have for dinner tonight, but just kind of engage that sense and really kind of experience just one thing that you can taste. And we're just kind of going to continue our calm, quiet breathing for just a couple more seconds. And that's it. So that's a pretty easy activity. You can do it. I do it with kids all the time. You can mix up You don't have to do like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You can just choose like 2 of each. You can just choose things that you can see. There are a bunch of ways that you can do it. But it's pretty accessible and it's pretty easy to remember. So it's, if you want, you're welcome to practice it moving forward.
Awesome. Thanks, Lisa. Anybody have anything else before we close? All right, until next time, grab your coffee cup.
Thank you.